Greetings, dear friends. I am sorry that the weather has caused many storms. When I saw what storms and strong winds had done to public and private property, I realized again how everything is changing. As a little boy in the village, I always perceived the 4-year period. And in the stormy rain, huge storms and storms were truly exceptional, thus becoming an integral part of our lives today. Everywhere where it is possible, the government is giving a helping hand in return. Likewise, I believe that the state humanitarian aid directed by the Ministry of Labor has worked and is working effectively. Let me return to the statements of the state witness of Saint Cyril and Methodius. Anti-national, anti-state, and anti-government media and the same opposition are raging as senseless. The legacy of the Solonian brothers of Saint Cyril and Methodius forms one of the basic value pillars of the politics of the current government and strongly influences me in many important political decisions. In the end, it is commanded by the Constitution, which in its preamble requires everyone to respect the spiritual legacy of Saint Cyril and Methodius and the legacy of Great Moravia. Our politics has a valuable content, and regardless of the lack of liberalism and progressivism, it cannot compete with us. What alternatives to our constitutional definition of masculinity as the only union of men and women are offered by liberals and progressives? What can they offer more intelligently than we, who claim that there are only two views, a man and a woman? And we want to put this in the Constitution? My brother lives with his own hands, and he has a healthy mind to distribute. He would say that liberal and progressive politics is worth as shallow as a stream in the yard, and it is really shallow. Dear friends, I am not surprised by what our opponents, whom I lovingly call spiritual homeless people, are doing with my speech on July 5th at 9. I prepared it carefully. First of all, I knew what I wanted to say. Therefore, it is funny, annoying, and I even have a feeling of a carried hump when I see the distrust in the media trying to correct my childish speech, like a pig in the gate. They know very well why they do not want to accept not even such a basic truth that Saint Cyril and Methodius did not build the railway between the West and the East, which is becoming a reality and which our liberals and progressives support so much. It would be difficult for us to find a truer story in history about the connection of the East and the West, when we realize where the Solon brothers came from and what they did. If you come across my childish statement and try to marginalize and underestimate it at all costs, please find a few minutes and listen to it to make your own judgment based on common sense and not on hatred and ignorance. On Tuesday, the trial with the man who wanted to kill me for my political opinion began. As I have publicly stated several times, I did not actively participate in the investigation, and I will not stop the trial. David Lindner, the legal representative of the court, personally and qualitatively represents me. I believe that I will not have to apologize to the court, because the court, in terms of evidence, lost the record of my interrogation. After the attempt to murder me, I did not have any trauma, and I continue to fulfill the duties of the chairman of the government. I forgave the attacker, and I will not ask him for anything. The problem is elsewhere. Opposition media and opposition politicians see a purge in the trial because the court will certainly not take their part in the attack because there is no evidence of this. However, there is insurmountable evidence that the attacker was an opposition activist, that he met representatives of the opposition, primarily the Democratic Party, that only around him he screams slogans from opposition, anti-government demonstrations, that he is just as obsessed with hatred. The attacker is a product of opposition hatred with his extended hand, a tool for pushing someone away. The opposition and the media, for a year from the attack, did not even show a pinch of respect for what happened. They are pushing me, the direction, the government, with even greater zeal and obsession. I dare say that in the last 12 months, They are making me and my colleagues monsters of such a caliber that they did not even allow it until May 15th, 2024. Therefore, it is only a matter of time when we will look at another murderous attack, and I express my desire in advance to have as much happiness with us as I had with my misfortune. It would be just and right if all those who produced it, so that everyone in Slovakia could see what hatred represented by intolerant politicians and slanderous media can produce. Dear friends, despite the fact that it is a holiday period, some topics are especially acute. With the whole team on a daily basis, I am resolving the position of the government to the proposal of the European Commission to stop from January 1st, 2028, all that comes from the Russian Federation. All those interested confirm that this purely ideological decision of the Commission, made only for Ukraine, will have personally harmful consequences. The questions will be about the supply of gas for our domestic consumption. It is quite clear that a significant increase in the price of gas for households and industries will not be enough for us to stop the Commission from taking Russian gas in 2028, even if we have a contract with the Russian Gazprom until 2034, all because of Ukraine. Why? These are the questions that, without any hesitation, concern the international interests of Slovakia, where we cannot just give in. Although the Commission's proposal to completely stop the Russian gas supply is a typical sanction, the Commission does not foresee it as a sanction because, when accepting sanctions, it requires the consent of all 27 member states of the Union, and the Commission knows well that it would never receive such support. Therefore, the Commission presents this proposal as a legislative act for approval, of which most votes are enough. So it is not unanimity. Someone may now ask why, if the Commission does not need the consent of all 27 member states, why the Commission does not change its proposal without being interested in the legal amendments of Slovakia. The answer is simple. At the same time as the proposal to stop the Russian gas flow, the proposal of the 18th package of sanctions against the Russian Federation is also on the table, which, as I have already mentioned, requires unanimity. Many member states of the European Union and the entire Commission are of great importance. My opinion on the sanctions is known. I will come back to it later. Now, however, it is necessary to say that we refuse to vote for the 18th package of sanctions and vote in favor of resolving our concerns regarding the price of gas, its supply and compensation for damages that will be caused by stopping the Russian gas flow from January 1st, 2028. Since it has not yet come to that, yesterday our Commander-in-Chief received an instruction from Brussels not to support the 18th package of sanctions. You know, no one in this fight can win 100-0, but our concerns must be eliminated in essential matters. Slovakia is a sovereign country, and I cannot allow unnecessary ideological gestures, such as stopping the Russian gas flow, to cause huge damage to our country. Yes, I must admit that the European Commission is trying to find a solution for Slovakia. In some open topics, we are getting closer to an agreement. In some, we are still far away. However, we cannot work under pressure and in an atmosphere of unnecessarily strong statements. In any case, I wish an agreement with the Commission, which would lead to such an amendment to its proposal to stop the Russian gas flow, which would protect us from the worst possible consequences. For me, the 18th package of sanctions against the Russian Federation is tragicomical. It does not touch, it does not damage our Slovak borders. Each package, whether it is from the 14th, 15th, or 18th, stands for a breakthrough, irreplaceable. How many such breakthrough, irreplaceable packages will still have to come? Sanction policy in the eyes of the Russian Federation does not work. In the NATO General Secretary himself, Mark Rutte talks about strengthening the Russian Federation in the war against Ukraine. Unfortunately, the ideology and obsession with Russia wins in the European Union over common sense. In this crazy and irrational atmosphere, at the time of the armistice, I, as the Prime Minister, have two essential roles. First, not to allow Slovakia to be dragged into senseless military adventure, so that we decide on defense issues at our own pace and in our established structure. And secondly, to do everything to protect the interests of Slovakia and its citizens from basic cultural and ethical issues. If we are members of the EU and NATO, it is not possible to say no to everything that comes from the kitchen of these organizations, as some Slovak politicians imagine. On the other hand, I am a guarantor that we will say yes to everything that comes from the EU and NATO, just so that we do not run out of the Council. On the subject of Russian influence and its complete withdrawal from January 1st, 2028, I will hold a special press conference tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, so that we Slovak public can provide as much information as possible. And on Saturday, many of us will meet in Stará Bystrica, at the celebrations of the declaration of the unification of the Slovak Republic, another important milestone in the construction of the Slovak state. I would like to thank the mayor and our ambassador, Janko Budmanaki, for his natural respect for this important event. Every year leads to dignified celebrations. Despite the fact that Slovakia needs a rainy day, we believe that on Saturday evening we will not need raincoats. Goodbye, dear friends.